Look at the world as the Eastern Hemisphere and Eurasia as the historic power. And when we talk of Eurasia, we talk about the European Peninsula, we talk about Central Asia, we talk about China, Japan. What emerges in the 20th century is another center of gravity, North America. The emergence of the United States changed the entire balance. And as you said, we are extremely powerful. Where does our power come from? Well, partly because of a very fertile land, partly because of enormous innovative power. And that innovative power is linked to the concept that I put before. That which is must be improved. The idea that nothing that exists economically, politically, or something is sufficient. The Europeans, the Chinese, they are constantly at war with each other. It is, to Americans, an amazing thing how many people died in the 20th century in Eurasia. But it's the case. But we are, as you said, protected by two oceans. We're the only country in the world that can't be attacked by land. Canada would be nice if it could attack us, it won't. Mexico, no, wants to move here. The United States, it doesn't want to attack us. We can be attacked only from the oceans. And the foundation of American national security is command of the sea. Admiral Mahan, our great theorist, said that. We must control the Pacific, we must control the Atlantic. And if we control these two oceans, then we have what Goethe called an elective affinity. We could come into Eurasia as we needed to and wanted to, but they could not come into us. So we have had the advantage of innovation on a continent that's relatively secure, and we have had the option, in most cases, of getting into war. The one case we didn't, Japan. Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, we had to go to war, and we had to protect the Pacific. In World War I, we got into World War I because the Germans were defeating the Russians, and Germany would then build a navy, and they would sail it into the Atlantic. And therefore, we went into World War I to be a force to block German power, and it worked. In World War II, we fought two naval wars. One, the Pacific. They gave that to us to fight. But also World War II was about the U.S. relationship to Britain and the British need for help on land and the American insistence that it control the seas. We talk about the idea of a lend-lease. Everybody forgets there are two parts to it. The lend was we would give the British some ships. The lease is they would turn over all of their bases in the North Atlantic and the West Coast to us. In other words, we fought the war for the seas. Now, when you are in that position, a chaotic Eastern Hemisphere, you are protected by the oceans, and countries in those areas come to you asking for help, and you get more control of the oceans. You don't have to go to war. And then you're in a very powerful position. Now, our relationship to China is like the relationship to the EU. We're open to anything, so long as it's on our terms. We're very flexible. But we have an ability to bring pressure to bear throughout the Eastern Hemisphere. That means that World War I, World War II, even the Cold War, was fought there, not here in the United States. And this is the issue with the Chinese. The Chinese are an exporting power, and their number one exporter partner is the United States. China gets foreign investment, and the number one investor in China is the United States. Now, they may want other things, but this is the way it is. And the Chinese may want Taiwan, and we don't want them to have it. It's not a big thing, but we like it. But we have a tremendous hammerlock on the Chinese. And in fact, next week, the American and Chinese president will be meeting to discuss the hammerlock. The hammerlock means hold. So it frequently appears that there are from the Chinese threats to the United States. But when you look very deeply into the Chinese reality, it isn't as it appears. And this gives the United States an advantage it always has. China's nightmare is that the United States will close their East Coast ports. China is an exporting power. It lives on exports. If those ports are closed, then they can't operate. The United States has the ability to close the ports by putting various missiles into position to do so. And therefore, the Chinese have made no move militarily. It's important to look at what China has done, which is nothing. Now, the United States has no desire to do this to the Chinese. But China also can't invade Taiwan. To invade a country, you have to have what's called amphibious craft, ships that go to sea. The Chinese have 8 amphibious vessels. Maybe they're hiding some, so 10, 12, doesn't matter. It takes 9 hours for one of those ships to get to Taiwan. In those 9 hours, American satellites will see them. And then the United States has a choice to sink the ships or not. Now, I don't know what we will decide, but neither do the Chinese. Under these circumstances, the best strategy is to make threats without carrying them out. And this strategy the Chinese have followed very well. You will observe that except for the Korean War, the U.S. and China never went to war. In all of this time that China has been rising to a great power, the United States has not carried out the military actions against them, and China has not tried to get in, because there's another side. The one thing we're afraid of is the Chinese coming into the Pacific Ocean and doing what the Japanese did, trying to take control. And each side understands that the other side has power, and rational people will therefore say, I don't know what's going to happen. I better not do anything. So what's happened here is that for the past couple of years, we have threatened each other. And the Americans have said, it's terrible, the world is about to end, the Chinese are coming. And nothing happened. Now the meeting comes. The meeting that comes on November 15th is an extremely important meeting. It is the meeting that comes after Xi has been repositioned. And it is at a time when the Chinese urgently need access to the American markets and to capital, and where the U.S. would love to put Russia in a position that China had an understanding with the United States. No particular good intended, but it'd be interesting. So this meeting, which is the G20 meeting that the Russians chose not to come to, is a place where the U.S. and the Chinese will make agreements. Because long before Xi and Biden sit down at a table, their aides have talked around what is going to be happening. And the Chinese need us. And we need the Chinese, and nobody cares about Taiwan. It's good for the newspapers. But the thing we have to understand is we will defend the Pacific Ocean. It is the foundation for security. So where it's going to be is less important than each side understand that the risks of war are greater than the benefits. And both sides really understand that. The U.S. could have crippled the Chinese by blocking the ports. The Chinese could send missiles toward Guam. All sorts of things could be done. The important thing about the U.S.-Chinese relationship is that nothing happened. Just talk.